Released by SNK in 1999 on the PlayStation, Koudelka would be the foundation for the Shadow Hearts series. Written, directed, and composed by Hiroki Kikuta, he would lead a team of former Square staff members into making a unique RPG within the horror genre. For story, the game features a gypsy named Koudelka, as well as two companions that join in later, a treasure seeker named Edward and a bishop named James. For progression, characters earn ability points at each level up with which the player can choose which stats to invest in for each character. For gameplay, the game utilizes 3D models against pre-rendered 2D backgrounds with fixed camera angles. There are random encounters with monsters, and the battle system used is a standard turn-based tactical grid format, so characters and enemies can move and position themselves anywhere in the battle scenario with separate action and move commands. The game also features survival elements with limited resources, no shops, weapon degradation, scarce save points, and limited ammunition. Finally, exploration is heavily dependent on solving puzzles with key items hidden around or won from bosses, as the game enjoys 3 different endings, one of which canonically leads into Shadow Hearts. The story only gets larger from here, so let's cut it down to size with a recapitation. As the game begins, it's October 31st, 1898 in Aberystwyth, Wales, as a wandering gypsy named Koudelka makes her way into an abandoned monastery. Scaling the walls, she loses her pendant after a slip and sneaks in while spotting an injured adventurer. She comments on his sorry state as he draws his gun to shoot the monster sneaking up behind her. She's batted aside as the man misses and he tosses her his gun to finish the fiend off. As thanks, she uses her magic to heal him from near death, surprising him. She introduces herself as Koudelka, a medium who happens to know some magic, and he introduces himself as Edward, a fortune seeker. As she suspects him to actually be a thief, Edward instead claims he came here following a rumor that a wealthy man bought the monastery and converted it into a luxurious mansion, and he arrived to spread the word of God, but instead was shocked to arrive and find the place filled with nightmarish monsters. Koudelka warns him to stick closer if he wants to leave alive, as the two form an uneasy alliance. Exploring more of the mansion, they encounter an old couple named Ogden and Bessie, who state they are the sole caretakers of here, Nemeton Monastery. Ogden explains Nemeton was built in the 9th century by Saint Daniel to appease the local monsters and evil spirits, though in the last 6 months, monsters have begun appearing again. The couple welcomes the pair all the same with warm food and bullets, to which Edward enjoys but Koudelka rejects, and afterwards she casually reveals she noticed the couple poison the food that Edward ate. As Edward reels in pain, Koudelka ponders how casual the couple was about murder and suspects they're hiding something. She says she'll heal him and points out it's easier if they avoid the couple and pretend they died so as to investigate easier. Finding an herb garden and killing the giant plant monster within, they rescue a priest named James, whose travels brought him here, though he too was surprised to find this place a nest for demons. Though wary of his saviors, he's more wary of the monsters about, so he joins Koudelka and Edward. As they investigate further, Koudelka gets a sudden headache after being overwhelmed by the sheer spiritual presence in her room, and decides to try channeling here to figure out what happened. She admits her reason for even being here is because she was called here by one particular female spirit. However, James disapproves of her practices and denies their accusation that Ogden and Bessie tried killing them, but Koudelka ignores him as she communes with the spirits here. She learns this place used to be a secret prison for hundreds of years, where thousands of people that defied authorities or charged for misconduct were sent here to be tortured to death. As a result, many angry and powerful spirits linger still, one of whom, a ghostly little girl, nearly gets Edward killed. James still isn't convinced, believing this to still be a holy monastery, and the deaths of heathens were likely justified. Edward is annoyed at hearing this, but Koudelka keeps them focused on searching. As they search, the floor suddenly collapses beneath them, dropping them into the dungeon, and Edward spots a suspicious figure looking on. The ghostly girl from before appears again, introducing herself as Charlotte, and mocks their attempts to escape this dungeon after cursing her own existence, living and dying unloved by anyone. Delving deeper, they find a way out that leads to a room full of treasure. This impresses James, as many are actually lost religious artifacts, but even Edward is distracted by the sheer number of dead bodies around them, and Koudelka wonders if the old couple are responsible for them all. Further in the storage room, their mysterious assailant tries to kill them from the shadows, though they soon catch up to him. He's actually just a normal thief who admits to trying to kill them just now so he can get all of the treasure, but he says he's not the one who killed all these people around them. Rather, he says the caretaker couple are the ones responsible for killing people who foolishly go after the treasure. Koudelka and Edward do believe him, though Edward doesn't overlook the fact that he tried to kill them and shoots him immediately, taking no chances. Later, they come across a room with another strong spiritual presence, and Koudelka experiences another wave of visions, seeing a woman named Elaine that she is sure is the one who called her here. Circling back to the room with the caretaker couple, the couple isn't there, but instead they find a bloody back room. Koudelka examines curious paintings of the sinking of the Princess Alice ship, and is reaffirmed by visions of its tragic victims. In addition, the priest himself seems to be hunting for a very specific document as well. Finding a coffin, they find what looks to be an old mummy, who surprisingly comes alive and mentions something called an immigrant document before collapsing again. James demands to know more, and Edward confronts James on coming clean about his motives. James explains he's on a mission from the Vatican to look for a manuscript called the Immigrant document that was stolen from the Vatican on order from the man who bought this monastery, Patrick. It's said the secrets to life and death are within the document, and Patrick has been dabbling in dangerous experiments of alchemy and resurrection. James says his mission is to retrieve the document and try to save Patrick as well. He heard Patrick was in the temple part of this complex, and so they move out to secret, finding a powerful convergence of energy in the church that creates a powerful demon that separates Koudelka from Edward and James. Alone, Koudelka explores the outer gardens of the monastery, finding a secret room Ogden used to kill victims. Unaware, he approaches behind her and knocks her out. When she wakes up, she sees Ogden ranting deliriously, mentioning Elaine and the sinking of the Princess Alice. Raising his axe to behead her, a gunshot rings out, as Bessie shoots her husband in the back. Lamenting, she explains Ogden was once the captain of the Princess Alice pleasure boat. One day there was a tragic fire that sank the ship, killing nearly everyone on board, and he was blamed for it, throwing him into retirement and ruin. One day he met Elaine, wife of Patrick, the man who bought this monastery, who believed his claim of innocence, and he was grateful for her support, as he and Bessie then became caretakers for their mansion. One day a robber broke in and killed Elaine, driving Ogden mad again, and thus killing all intruders to the monastery to this day. With that, she sets Koudelka free and turns the gun to herself, committing suicide to join her husband in death. Afterwards, she hears Edward on the opposite side of a heavy door, genuinely concerned for her safety. While they can't move the heavy door, they agree to meet on the opposite side of the cathedral and the library, splitting up again. Exiting out into the graveyard, Koudelka finds the grave of Saint Daniel, who built this monastery, where she is approached by the strange mummy she encountered in the coffin earlier. It turns out his name is Roger Bacon, a monk and warlock, who is indeed a mummy that has been asleep for at least the last century. He unlocks the way forward for her in exchange for telling her companions to stop causing such a ruckus inside. She then finds the grave of Charlotte, the ghost girl she encountered earlier as well, and whose letters from her mother she found confiscated by the guards. As she meets up with Edward and James again, she informs them of her encounter with the caretakers, and how they indeed were the ones killing all intruders as vengeance for Elaine, a name that James is shocked to hear. As Koudelka shares a tragic backstory of the caretakers, James now opens up, confessing that when growing up and attending university, he befriended Patrick, who was studying the same fields as him. However, they both competed for the hand of their mutual love interest, Elaine, who soon ended their friendship and turned it into a rivalry. Unfortunately, despite his love for her, James knew he didn't have the status or wealth to take care of Elaine, and so stepped back and allowed Patrick to court and marry her. Taking solace in the church, James left and quickly rose ranks into a bishop in the Vatican, not seeing Patrick or Elaine for 20 years, thinking his friends to be happily married. Koudelka then reveals the key she took off of the caretakers, which unlocks Patrick's mansion, as she suspects there's something bigger beneath all that, that's the real reason for all the monsters. United again, the trio moves onward, passing by bizarre evidence of Patrick's experiments. In addition, they find a hauntingly well-kept and furnished cell belonging to Charlotte, the ghost girl. Koudelka shows her the letters from her mother she found earlier, and explains the circumstances that her mother was locked away, yet sent dozens of letters expressing hope and love for her daughter, not aware that Charlotte was killed years ago. Overwhelmed by the letters and reluctant to receive the news, Charlotte accepts the letters and her grudge is resolved, finally passing on. Running into Roger Bacon again, James recognizes him as a famous warlock from centuries ago, and as it turns out, he was the one who transcribed a copy of the Immigrant document on behalf of the Pope. Thus, he too learned the secrets of life, death, and immortality within before the Pope arranged to have him killed. Thwarting this, he escaped to enact one of the rituals within, and thus has lived for the past over 650 years, yet had not figured out how to preserve his body, hence why he exists now as a living mummy. They also find notes from Patrick, confirming he procured the Immigrant document from the Vatican for the purpose of resurrecting Elaine. For it, he needed to leverage the thousands of angry souls from the prison aspect of the monastery, an ancient gold cauldron in the dungeon, and hundreds of fresh human sacrifices. With the help of Ogden, who was eager to help bring back Elaine too, he had preserved Elaine's body with chemicals and prepared the ritual. Instead, a massive tree of life sprouted forth from her body, creating a soulless copy of her in a flower bud, utterly defeating Patrick in his failure. To atone, he finally resolved to killing himself alongside the monster he created. Finding a large painting of Elaine, James no longer doubts Koudelka's claims of hearing Elaine calling her here, and proceeds to channel her. The spirit of Elaine comes forth, recognizing James and explaining that 18 years ago, she was murdered by burglars when Patrick and Ogden were out on business. She doesn't blame anyone, and confirms Patrick conducted an ancient resurrection ceremony. However, he only resurrected her body, as evident by her soul still wandering free, so her body is just a soulless monster. She then begs James to destroy her body, before vanishing and leaving him in tears, as he still hasn't come to grips with her death yet. He bemoans sacrificing the love of his life, his trusted friend, and the last 20 years of his life, only to be left with nothing to show for it, but being forced to destroy a cruel abomination in her form. Consulting Roger Bacon again, he says destroying her body will be a complicated process to undo, since making it was also equally complicated. They can start by using the arm of St. Daniel, who built this cathedral, and throwing it into the cauldron, and that will destroy the roots of the Tree of Life. For the rest of the body, he still needs to think, so they move on to conduct the first part. Making it to the temple, they find the heavy doors beyond their means to budge, but James thinks to use Patrick's old chemistry lab to concoct an explosive to open the way forward. As they wait for James to finish, Koudelka and Edward get drunk together, sharing their personal stories with each other. Edward was a failed academic whose lust for adventure turned him into a wanderer looking for a place to belong. Koudelka's psychic powers got her banished from her gypsy clan at the age of 9 out of fear, and she was forced to prostitute herself and struggle alone ever since. In many ways, she relates herself to Charlotte, being jaded, scornful, and unloved. The only reason she continues on is because she learned how to use her powers to ease the pain of others, which makes her feel a little bit better as it makes her feel needed by someone. James now returns, his explosive ready, and they detonate it to enter the temple. Within, they see the roots of the Tree of Life sprawling everywhere, and climbing up they see the corpse of Patrick, who evidently failed to kill his creation. James resolved to finish what his friend started, and with firm resolve is willing to sacrifice himself if need be. With the arm of St. Daniel, they drop it into the cauldron, and as the roots writhe and shrivel, James lights them aflame to destroy them for good. Climbing the burning church, they reach the top where they find the flower bud Patrick mentioned. As it unravels, they see the monstrously resurrected Elaine, who immediately fires a beam of dark magic out at them that Koudelka shields them from just in time thanks to her recovered pendant. Wrenching itself free, it then skitters about until Edward shoots it down, where it then continues its pursuit of the group up the church tower. At the pinnacle of the bell tower, there is nowhere left to run, and cornering them, Elaine's monster advances into a larger, more insectile form, calling down lightning to destroy the tower around them. Banding together, the outcast psychic Koudelka, the reckless adventurer Edward, and the forlorn Bishop James struggle to hold their ground against the mutated abomination of a lost love, but are still overwhelmed. As the game ends, Elaine confronts a beaten and tired group, and James stands, now accepting of his fate as God's will for him and punishment for his actions in the past. Standing firm with his faith and declaring his love for the true Elaine, James calls down a column of holy light that envelops both of them. As the light purifies and delivers them to death, Elaine's soul returns to her restored body and tells James how she treasured her memories of him too, and now they can move on together. As the church begins collapsing, Edward takes Koudelka into his arms and leaps off the burning rooftop, confident they'll survive. The next day, the sky's clear for the first time in years, and Roger Bacon comes in, amused at the accomplishment of the group. Koudelka and Edward enjoy a one-night stand together, and the next morning both agree to part ways from here. Koudelka stays behind in Nemeton with Roger Bacon, and he asks her if she wants to travel forward with Edward, but Koudelka says she has a feeling they'll see each other again someday. Koudelka has enjoyed the success of selling over 80,000 copies worldwide. This recapitation was chosen by Ninja Commander. Thank you for supporting the show as a patron. I know a lot of people are glad to shine more light on the Shadow Hearts series. If you would like to support the show yourself, please follow the Patreon link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next battlefield.